Okay, fantastic. First of all, I would like to welcome everyone to the kickoff meeting for the next phase of the Honey, I Shrunk the NASA Payloads Challenge. We are really excited to have you all here and looking forward to answering your questions about this upcoming phase. I will start us off with some introductions in just a moment, but first of all, I'd like to do an overview of how you can use this Zoom meeting. So everyone will be on mute, and please don't unmute yourself unless, of course, you're one of the NASA folks on our panel. And if you do have a question or a comment, you can type it into the chat box. We will also be using the questions that you all posted to Slido and just starting at the top and working our way through them. So please use that for any questions pertaining to this next phase, and we'll try and answer as many as we can for you today. Any that we don't get through, we will follow up in writing, and we have received quite a number, so our team is willing to stay on a few minutes longer if needed to get these questions answered. This meeting is also being recorded, and we will share the recording out with you, so no worries about quickly jotting down notes. You'll be able to have access to these answers. And with that, I'd like to start us with some introductions. So first of all, my name is Kyla Jeffrey. I'm the main point of contact at HeroX and will be moderating the meeting. Jeff, I will pass it over to you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jeff Doy. I represent the Center of Excellence for Collaborative Innovation, which is the contract tool that the NASA JPL team is using for this contest. Look forward to working with y'all. Thanks.
Great. Thanks, Jeff. Okay, Eloise. Oh,
hi, everybody. Sorry, I was struggling to unmute myself. My name is Eloise Young, and I am the challenge designer for this challenge with HeroX. I look forward to hearing everyone's questions.
Great. Thank you so much. Valerie.
Hi, everyone. I'm Valerie Scott. I'm an instrument engineer at JPL, and I look forward to hearing your questions and getting you guys some answers.
Great. Kevin, I see you just jumped on. If you can do a quick introduction for us.
Yeah, I'm Kevin Kempton. I work in the Game Changing Technology Development Program Office, as well as prizes and challenges. It's good to be here. Look forward to having you guys develop some payloads for the moon.
Awesome. Thanks, Kevin. And Andrew, last but not least.
I'm Andrew Shapiro. I'm in the Space Technology Office at JPL, and I'm kind of responsible for having you all be here. So I'm glad that you're here to join us.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Andrew. Okay, I'm going to hand it over to Andrew now. The NASA folks are going to do about a 10-minute introduction to what this next challenge is, and then we'll move into the Q&A. So Andrew, over to you.
Thank you, Kyla. So welcome and congratulations. It was not easy to get as far as you've gotten here, and so you should all be congratulated on a job well done to make it to this round. We're really pleased to have all of the teams, and we're looking forward to working with you all. So I wanted to give you just kind of a high-level overview of why we're doing this and what the targets are, and some maybe details that you might not be aware of, or maybe you are. So, but please bear with me. So, what this challenge is for are for very small payloads to go on other payloads that will go on something called CLPS landers. Now, NASA has awarded, I believe, 14 CLPS landers at this point, and these are commercial landing systems that are going to the moon over the next 5 or 6 years, and probably so far, and then we'll probably continue on a very rapid basis after that. These are progressively larger landers, starting with very small ones. The first ones we're going to be on are small landers, then you go to medium-sized landers, then they're going to go to large landers. And the large landers, they're going to try a few out first with cargo, but eventually the large landers are designed to put astronauts on the moon. And so ultimately, these are support functions that will go to a larger lunar program. These first payloads, the ones that you're working on, are targeted for the very first small landers to start with. And your payload, if you're successful at getting through everything and actually getting selected, would end up going on payload that goes onto the lunar lander. And right now we're looking at things like different types of rovers. There are 3 or 4 rovers. One was just announced. I know they're considering several other rover types. And so your payload might go on one of these rovers. I know they're also planning to put a robotic arm on at least one of the landers, probably more. And it's possible your payload might be associated with that robotic arm as a tool that would be taken from the lander and then placed on the surface or held close to the surface, depending on the requirements of your payload. So ultimately, if you're selected through the end of phase 2, your payload has a good chance of actually getting a ride to the moon and taking data on the moon. And that's our objective, is to really make meaningful measurements in the lunar environment using these very small payloads. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Valerie, who's going to tell you a little bit more about the details.
Hey everybody. So I mainly want to touch base with you about 2 documents. So the first being the Small Lunar Payload User's Guide. So you all should be familiar with most of the information in there, because there was one in the phase 1 proposal that you guys went through already. This is now updated based on, you know, the most current information we have for the proper interfacing requirements. There has been some additional information added with regards to the types of science that we are looking, and when I say science, that's also broad in the in situ resource utilization and the environmental monitoring. So that's kind of a broader term than perhaps is sometimes used for science. But the kinds of measurements that we're looking for, there's a lot of references in there for you guys to help you make your science case and tie back into NASA priorities. So you really need to pay attention to both the what NASA wants and the requirements and your design. So we need to make sure that you're really designing this for what the user's guide is spelling out. The second thing is, it's not a flat out document, but it is the proposal itself. And so on the HeroX platform, you'll see a layout of the different sections that we're asking from you. And there are some kind of details on what each section you should be thinking about addressing. And really go through that in detail and really kind of look through some of the information that we're looking for, because we're asking these things on purpose so that we can you know, appropriately assess the likelihood of being able to integrate this onto one of these lunar platforms. So so you really need to go through and think about both the science that you're doing, what you are delivering, and why this is important to NASA, and make a case for that. And you also really need to think about your technical approach, right? What is your plan to get from point A to point B, where point B is an instrument that is essentially ready for environmental testing and ready for integrating onto a platform in about a year. So this is a fast timeline. So one of the things that we are offering up in advance is that you can submit part of your proposal in advance so that we can give you feedback and kind of help you through the process. We really want you to submit the best proposals possible. We want you to succeed. So so I think that probably is enough of a high level overview for me, unless there's something else you want to add to that, Andrew.
No, that's great, Valerie. Thank you. I think that pretty well covers it. So Kyla?
Great, thank you so much. Okay, I'm going to share my screen and just walk through a few things that are right in front of us that I want to make sure everyone is aware of as we enter this next phase. So this is what the page looks like for the next phase of Honey, I Shrunk the NASA Payload Challenge. You do need to be logged into your HeroX account to see it currently. As you know, this information in this page is currently confidential, and it will be launching live on October 15th. So in order to see it, you have to be one of the teams that previously won, and you have to be logged into your HeroX account to see it. You're welcome to share this content with potential teammates that you're recruiting. We just ask that you don't share it more broadly than that until October 15th. In this challenge page, the place to really spend some time looking and reading through is the guidelines tab, which goes through everything that you'll be expected to complete and all the information that you need for this first phase. I also want to highlight the registration tab, and these are the steps that you must do by October 8th. So this deadline is approaching very quickly, and essentially we need every team to let us know if you are planning on participating in this upcoming phase by October 8th by completing this registration form. So please make sure you come back here and you read through this information if you haven't already taken a look at it. Okay, we are now going to move into the Q&A. So I am going to share this screen and we'll go through the questions that we have up here. Again, if you have additional questions, please post them in Slido. I will put the link back in the chat and vote up your favorites, and we will do our best to answer as many as we can and follow up with those that we don't get to after the call. Okay, so first question, and Valerie, I think you addressed this a little bit in your overview, but I'll just ask it anyways in case there's anything you'd like to add. Any additional example project plan information that shows the level of granularity that is required for phase 1 submissions?
Yeah, so I don't think our plan was not to provide an example, but to give you feedback in advance of the submission deadline. So you know, you're going to need to include in your plan, you know, your major milestones, how you're getting there, what the major deliverables are when you're delivering them to us. You'll see in the user's guide and in the deadlines for things along the phase 2 that there are things that are spelled out, like there's a full packet of documentation that will be due to us well in advance of the payload. So that should be one of your major deliverables, and it should be in your project plan. So so yeah, I don't think the intention is to give you something to work off of, but we will definitely give you feedback.
Great, thanks, Valerie. Okay, as we go through these questions, if there are details in our answers that leave you still unclear, please just post in the chat on Zoom and we'll do our best to add any clarifications. Okay, next question. Will access be provided to a spacecraft interface simulator, or do we have to roll our own?
No, I think in this case, you'll have to start with your own. It's really just simply a connector of the right style, and then there are only a handful of wires that will need to feed into that connector. But until we get to the part where you've actually delivered the payloads, you'll have to do that yourselves.
Great, thanks, Andrew. Okay, is there a limit to the number of team members?
No. You just have to pay them all, or however you work that out, but there's no limit.
Great, thanks, Andrew. Okay, can access be provided to NASA environmental chambers and lunar simulators for early or pre-testing of prototypes at zero budget cost to the team?
The current planning is for us to do the environmental testing once you deliver the objects. So probably not prior to delivery of the prototypes.
Great, thank you. Okay. Labor costs are assumed to be a part of the development money. What are the restrictions in terms of who can work? Foreign citizen, ITAR, export restrictions. So I will answer this one. So there are some restrictions on participation, and those are all detailed in the legal agreement for the challenge that you can access on the challenge page I was sharing earlier. So please do read through it in full. Some things that you should be aware of is that no part of the submission can violate US federal sanctions. Submissions need to be from either the US or a designated country, and there is a link to those list of countries that are designated. If you are not from a designated country, you must have a team lead that is from one, and your submission must be substantially transformed in that designated country or in the US prior to submitting to NASA. There are some additional participation restrictions on places like Cuba. Iran, Burma, North Korea, and Sudan that are prohibited. And you can see all those details in the legal agreement. The final aspect of this question is around ITAR. So any releases of technical data must comply with ITAR, and we are bringing in a specialist on ITAR to be able to provide some additional information to the teams, and that is looking like it will happen on October 15th. So please stay tuned from that, but the answer is yes, you must be compliant with ITAR in your participation. Okay. What will be the monthly hours commitment to the NASA project manager, including report generation?
There's no monthly commitment. You will have put together a plan, a spending plan, and however you manage that spending plan is up to you. There are no commitments of any kind other than you deliver your payload at the end with the correct documentation package. So how you submit a plan and you work to the plan, however you do that.
Great, thanks, Andrew. Just to add one additional element to Andrew's response, each team that moves into the development phase will have some team-specific milestones that we'll create in collaboration with you. So those will also be additional kind of check-in points where you need to achieve a certain milestone. Okay, how do you present future questions past the orientation webinar? Is it the same as the process as the previous competition? Yes, please post them in the forum if you have questions that you didn't ask today. Again, we will do our best to answer everything that's already been submitted here, so you don't need to re-ask these questions in the forum. But for future questions, that's the place to go for them. And we do have a few webinars planned for this first phase to support you in creating your project plan, which will be additional places like this to ask questions, but they will be on specific subject matter. Okay, regarding ITAR listed components, can NASA facilitate access to these parts for integration in a non-US country, but one that is designated? The answer to that is no. NASA cannot integrate ITAR restricted components. Okay, when are TBDs removed from the Small Lunar Payload Users Guide?
I think we're going to have an update coming out in the next couple of days. And Val, are there any TBDs left on that? I don't think there are.
Yeah, I don't think there are. I'm looking through it right now.
So yeah, so we have an update that's coming out in the next day or two. It's under final review. All the changes have been made. We're just double checking. But the answer is probably tomorrow.
Great. And we are planning and hoping to be able to share with you the track changes of that document so you can see where those differences are. Will the JPL final test plan be available for review? If so, will it be available in time to steer development decisions?
That's a difficult question to answer because the test planning may be specific to the payload, but in terms of the test plan for the platform that the payload will attach to, the answer is yes, we should be able to have that available for you, but it'll be fairly late in the cycle. We can give you a rough idea of what it will look like ahead of time, but the precise details won't be available until we're very near the testing.
Great, thanks, Andrew. And so for the teams that do progress past the project plan and development plan stages, that development phase will be in close collaboration with NASA. So you will have some hours allocated for subject matter expert guidance, and those kinds of conversations can be brought up then with those teams that progress.
So I wanted to interject and go back for a minute. There are still a couple of TBDs with regards to electromagnetic testing, software interfacing. So they're much more limited than they were. These will get updated as we get the information. You know, we will work with you through some of these things. We recognize that this makes, you know, development challenging in some ways, but they are highly limited at this point. So if there is a particular concern that is making it challenging for you that's specific to your payload, you can reach out to us and we'll work on it.
Great, thanks, Valerie. And the best way for people to reach out is to propose what they would like to see for those requirements. Is that right? And you can let them know if that's feasible.
Yeah. So that actually comes back to another thing that, we were talking about earlier, that, if there is something that is not in the user's guide that you have a question on, and we're not giving you a definite requirement, you can come to us with some numbers about what you would need for your payload, and we can tell you if this is feasible or not. So that's another way to go about doing this.
Great, thanks, Valerie. And so for those questions that are very specific to your team, where you're wondering, like, does this number or metric work for the payloads, you're welcome to message me directly about that. But for anything that's general to the competition, like all of the questions we've been through so far, that should go in the forum. Okay, is rover movement planned for lunar night missions?
So let me address a couple of things. This is a great question. One thing that I maybe failed to mention in my opening remarks is that the platforms that that these payloads are going on are not complete yet. So sometimes the requirements from those platforms might change a little bit. We have a pretty good idea. I would say they're nailed down to the 80 or 90% level, but there may be some minor changes on how they implement the platforms as they go forward to get them ready for integration. So you should just be aware that that's a possibility. In terms of night missions, so your payload may or may not be on a rover. It could, for instance, be on the landing vehicle and then be deployed by a robotic arm. And there are several types of rovers. None of the ones at this point are designated to run at night. I think in later missions, they probably will, but at the moment, none of them are included with night operations.
Great, thanks, Andrew. Okay, is JPL building any of their own miniature rover payloads? Is there a costed example?
So we have been looking at miniature payloads and we've been building a few prototypes, but no, we have not costed any of them.
Okay, which capacitors are suitable or permitted for use in the experiment?
I will have to contact our electrical engineers to answer that question. I mean, I think usually X7R based capacitors are suitable for this kind of environment, but I'll need to double check.
Got it. Thanks, Andrew. So we will get back to the teams on this one. Non-mobility missions are now defined. Does this mean that we can propose payloads as stationary on a lander instead of on a lunar rover?
Yes, that's possible.
Why is the max budget per team so low? Maybe allowing 18 months for hours after subtracting components for 3 prototypes does not go very far on a larger team.
Yes, so probably for larger teams, you probably just want a few key people that are working on it, and the rest are more of an advisory function or play a smaller role. Mostly it's limited because we have limited budgets.
Can early prototypes be run through the final test process early for pre-testing? I think you already spoke to this, but is there anything additional you'd like to add?
No, I think when we get to that phase, we'll try to assist in as much pre-testing as we can. But at this point, we can't commit to anything prior to the delivery of the working units.
Okay, what is meant by a structural verification plane, and is it only to prove fit in the external structure?
Yeah, so it should be structural verification plan, and it's really the simulation of the structural integrity, particularly related to dynamic loading. We're mostly interested in loading during launch and any stage separations. So a certain amount of vibration and shock that'll need to be accounted for. And so we expect the teams to do some kind of simulation to look at that, and we can give you specific requirements as we get closer to what the launch vibration loads might look like in the different aspects.
Great, thanks, Andrew. Okay, is there a chance that JPL will request hardware changes after reviewing the documentation package?
I think it's possible.
Okay. And just to put teams at ease, I think those would all happen in collaboration with the team, right, Andrew? And we would
Yes,
be working with you
absolutely.
through them. Absolutely.
Yeah, we would expect to team with you. It's your payload. We need to understand it and work with the NASA teams. Will need to work with the contestant teams to make sure that the payload is operational. Everybody wants it to succeed, so we'll all be working together at that point.
Okay. I think we already spoke towards this, but anything else you'd like to add about whether the primary investigator will be required to work full time on the project?
No, there are no time requirements. You can work on it as much or as little as you like. The only thing is to stay within the cost cap.
Is it allowed to pressurize the payload to 1 bar absolute pressure? Are we allowed to enclose the payload completely within a casing?
So I think pressurization is not allowed by the rules working with our launch providers. You can encase the payload. That's not a problem.
Okay, are there any specific types of expertise that judges would like to see?
I don't know, Valerie, do you want to take that one?
Sure. I would say it's entirely dependent on your payload. Just have a team and no, a PhD is not required. Past experience is a good thing, but it's not required. I apologize for the cat on the piano. Yeah, you just want to build a team that will convince us that you will be able to carry out your plan. That's really it. So there's not a specific expertise, but if your instrument is doing spectroscopy, then you might want to have somebody who has some experience with spectroscopy on your team. This is just an example, right? So that's kind of generally what we're looking for, the match of your team to your payload. That's it.
Great, thanks, Valerie. And this is a crowdsourcing competition, right? We're not looking at NASA engineers to complete these payloads. We're looking out to people from around the world. So there are no specific expertise, as Valerie mentioned. This is really open, and you can propose and recruit the team that you need to be most effective. Okay, flexibility on max character limits for the phase 1 proposal submission subsections. I think we can probably take a look at it and see if there's a specific section that you think is too short. Please let us know, but we are trying to encourage concise responses to the phase 1 submission. Valerie, Andrew, Eloise, anything you'd like to add there?
No,
I think that covers it.
I will say that, oh, I'm so sorry. I will say that I think that lots of times people forget that there's a lot of information that can be shared perhaps in a diagram or in a table, and that is a very space efficient way of conveying information, and many of those things can be uploaded as part of your supporting documentation.
And I would encourage proposers to refer to those extra documents, refer to those figures in your extra documents in your proposal, so that when a reviewer is reading your proposal, they know that that information is elsewhere, so that they don't then go digging through your information later and say, oh, I didn't even see that. So make it easy on the reviewer as much as possible.
Great, thanks, Valerie. Good addition. Okay, is it possible that exemplary vibration patterns for structural analysis and design validation will be supplied?
Yes, we will supply the complete harmonics for for the payload. The issue is that because we don't know exactly which launch vehicle, the harmonics for the different launch vehicles are slightly different. And so we can give you kind of a generic one to start with, but then it'll be tailored depending on which specific launch vehicle we end up with.
Great, thank you. Okay. What delay should there be between 2 consecutive power peaks?
I think this needs to go back to tell us what you need, and we'll see if we can accommodate that. It just depends on how much power that you're using. If you're using the maximum amount of power, then that may be longer. So if you can tell us what you need, then we'll see if that can be accommodated.
Okay, is there a guide value for the gap between payload and interface panel outside of the interface bearing points, or is it only necessary to ensure that there is a gap?
I think we'll have to go back and check with our mechanical engineers to answer that question. I don't know offhand.
Okay, how mature should our prototypes be after a year? I'm assuming this is probably after the year of development time, so when they're sending back their prototypes.
So they should be ready for environmental testing at that point. And if we're asking for multiple copies of your final payload, once we will test some of the copies, and if they pass everything, then the one that we haven't tested extensively will probably be the one that we put on the spacecraft. So they should be ready to go.
Great, thank you. And so in the challenge guidelines, you'll see that we're asking for TRL level 5, which corresponds with that for your payload submission. Okay, are partnerships with academia allowed?
Yes, not only allowed, but encouraged.
Will funding be awarded via small business innovation research or technology transfer mechanisms? No, this is a crowdsourcing competition, so the funding will be awarded in the same manner it was for phase 1. Jeff or anyone else, any clarification? Okay. Will the winning team be allowed to write some form of research paper if the device is completed and deployed?
Yes, we would encourage you to write, to publish both in journals and in conferences if yours is selected and moves forward.
Great, thanks, Andrew. This might be a good time to just talk about the intellectual property structure of this challenge at a high level. So as the submitter, you will retain ownership of any intellectual property that you create, but you are granting the government a license to use that IP. Okay, can you give a precise definition of subcontract as used in the challenge-specific agreement? I do not have a precise definition right now, but I can see if I can get one and take a look into that. Okay, I think this next question, Jeff, if I can have your contribution, could you elaborate on this form that we're signing with the intellectual property rights? And so I believe this is the NTR form that you all received recently. And so in the first challenge, as part of your submission, it had the same intellectual property structure as this one, where you retain owner of the IP, but you do grant the government a license to use it. So this form is documenting more fully that agreement that you already accepted. Anything you'd like to add, Jeff?
Yeah, it's just documenting the license transfer to the government to use your original submission.
So I guess there are a couple of things that need to be commented on there. One of them is that under NSTGRO, I'm not sure you're allowed to receive additional funds. So you need to be careful on that. The intellectual property doesn't matter because it all goes to the same place, whether it's NSTGRO JSC or PRISM, the intellectual property is covered. It's all the same. And also we may expect that the actual integration cost of the platform into the lander will probably be on PRISM as well. So it's all the same thing. But you do want to check with NSTGRO because you're not allowed to be double funded for developing the same thing. So you need to draw a bright line between what work you're doing under NSTGRO and then what the team would be doing under the competition.
Great, thanks, Andrew. And whoever did submit this question under anonymous, if you can also just reach out and let me know who you are so we can make sure we're navigating this with you. Okay, should the delivered payload prototype reach TRL 6 after successful environmental tests at NASA? Could that happen that one payload will be the flight model?
So, yes, the answer is yes to both those questions.
Awesome. And that is the intention, right? That two payloads will be tested and one payload will be the flight model. So
that is correct. Apologize for my dog in the background.
Okay, is there a planned breakdown of the 4 payloads selected for the next phase? 2 from lunar environment, 2 from lunar resources, for example?
No, there's no planned breakdown. It's whichever ones score the highest.
Okay, is having multiple development sites, i.e. 2 different locations allowed if one site is working primarily on software development? So yes, you can complete your development wherever you like, as long as you are abiding by all of the restrictions in the challenge specific agreement regarding location. Would there be potential for technology licensing agreements for the final product after delivery to NASA and successful deployment? So I think maybe this question is asking about licensing agreements to companies other than NASA, is my understanding. Is that what you're reading to, Andrew?
Yes, and Jeff may be able to speak to this better, but I think the objective is to actually encourage that. One of the objectives of these overall lunar missions is to have these objects available for companies to sell to the rest of the world.
Absolutely, and we hope that you're retaining ownership of the IP and having the potential to create licensing agreements with other companies and really let your technology grow into something after the competition. We'll support you in places where some of the development funding that we're offering doesn't cover all of your expenses. So you can also look at it from that perspective of what else there is that you're receiving within this competition. Eloise, is there anything else you'd like to offer about that point?
No, I think that just in general, for crowdsourcing competitions, the goal is to help motivate the crowd to attack interesting and unusual problems by offering an incentive, but it's not to actually provide essentially payment in full. So yes, the development cost for these payloads is certain to be larger than what is being offered as sort of supporting funds. But the idea is to help people get their ideas out to where they might not normally get to. It's not to just completely underwrite their efforts.
Okay, great. Is there a link to a detailed specification and statement of work for the effort? So I can maybe start on that one. No, there's not. As we stated, you are creating what the development plan will be for your proposed payload. And so your statement of work is essentially what you are putting in that development plan and what you need to complete. What's currently in the challenge guidelines should give you guidance on what you'll need to accomplish at the end of this period. Valerie or Andrew, anything you'd like to add?
No, I think you covered it.
Okay. Could there be a working and successfully tested prototype that will not be selected to fly on a mission? Will a payload place be reserved on a mission at some point?
Yeah, it is possible that you could have your working prototype and have it not be selected for a mission. It's also possible that it could be selected for a mission but not fly. A lot of that depends on the way the manifests work at NASA. So there's no guarantee of a flight. We're hoping that it's a very high probability. We'll do our best to get the onto the platforms, onto the landers, but there's no guarantee at this point.
Okay, what are the judging criteria to pass in the phase 2? I'm assuming this means to be selected from phase 1 and move into phase 2. So I'm just going to reshare my screen here on the challenge guidelines. So that evaluation criteria is in this section. If you scroll down, you will see the phase 1 judging criteria. So this is what we will be using to evaluate the payloads and select who should be moving forward. So please do use this as your guidelines for what we're looking for in those initial plans. Okay, tests on prototypes that require special equipment or lab facilities will be provided or funded by NASA.
So I'm not quite sure I understand the question, but certainly all the environmental testing we will take care of at NASA for the different teams after they deliver their working prototypes.
Great. So just to help everyone visualize the timeline, right now you're creating your project plan and your development plan, and those are due in January. From there, up to 4 teams will be selected to complete the development, and you will have about a year to do that. In that time, there will not be NASA lab facilities available to you, but there will be some subject matter expertise and guidance that NASA can provide. The testing will happen after you deliver those 3 prototypes in January of 2022. Okay, what is the expectation for material certifications mentioned in the documentation package?
I think they're NASA standards in terms of how materials are certified. Mostly we want to make sure that the material that you're using is from a legitimate and certified supplier so that they know, for instance, what batch number the material comes from, that kind of thing. So you want some documentation in terms of exactly where your material comes from.
Okay, is 40 hours of subject matter help a firm limit? I will say for now, yes, that is the limit. And as we're working with those phase 2 teams, we can probably keep it in mind, but for now, 40 hours is the limit. Andrew, Valerie, anything you'd like to add?
We will do the best to help you as we can, but keep in mind that we do have limitations on our resources as well.
Will our products be tested in PSR-like environments? For example, vacuum, cryogenic, lunar regolith?
Yes, they will.
Can we rely on NASA to answer technical questions?
Yes, to a certain extent. There are certain technical questions that would maybe violate ITAR restrictions, and so there are certain things we cannot help you with.
Okay, can you talk, go ahead, Jeff.
Just gonna mention that we were gonna review those on the 15th in that ITAR call specifically.
Great, thank you. Can you talk generally about the level of technical and programmatic risk tolerance in phase 2?
So I don't know if Kevin wants to talk to this at all, but the CLPS landers themselves are considered high-risk missions for NASA. They're technology demonstrations, and they're actually not classified according to the NASA classification of missions. In addition, we have payloads that are not classified on top of unclassified missions, and we have a payload on an unclassified mission. So the risk tolerance in NASA terms is extremely high for these. In terms of commercial products, probably the risk tolerance is pretty low.
Okay. Can you talk a little bit more about those resources that we're providing to teams in phase 2? What kind of engineering and scientific support is available?
Well, we'll do our best to find experts in your area to assist with questions. Certainly we can, any of the engineering questions, we can provide the access to the engineering teams who will be integrating it onto the platforms.
Great. And again, just to be clear on the what type of support, that is the 40 hours of subject matter expertise time over the development period. Or sorry, how much support is what that is. Okay, how much preference will be given to cheaper but still credible proposals?
I think look at the judging criteria that Kyla showed earlier. I think the weighting of the different aspects of that should be self-explanatory.
Yeah.
Great. I do just want to add one more thing going back to the other question about what guidance NASA will be providing. There is an opportunity to provide or submit your preliminary phase 1 project plan, and there's certain parts of that plan that you're able to submit early, and NASA will be able to provide you feedback. But it will be more along the approach of, are you tackling the right things, rather than is your approach acceptable? Andrew, anything else you'd like to add?
No, I think that covers
Okay,
it.
great. And similarly, in phase 2 documentation package, there's a similar review process. Okay, another question clarifying cost. Andrew or Eloise, do you want to see if you can offer any additional guidance or insight?
Andrew, I will let you go first, and then I will follow up after you've shared your thoughts.
Yeah, I think the answer is yes. And that is correct interpretation. And it would also include the documentation package for that.
And so my additional remarks are that we would hope that you would be able to, although you cannot look to SBIR or STTR type funding to supplement whatever development funds you might win for phase 2 work, you would be able to solicit support from other groups, private organizations, companies that might be able to support with providing either instrumentation or additional other resources. And so we would strongly encourage you to look for partners that can help you bridge the gap.
Great, thank you. Okay, what are the shock and vibration requirements of the payload prototypes?
I think this is related to what we had mentioned earlier. We can give you kind of a generic version of that, and we will supply that to you as you move forward. But the specific ones aren't available until we know exactly which launch vehicle we'll be on.
Are radioactive sources permitted on the payload?
Valerie, you want to cover this?
I would say yes. However, you're going to want to build into this, requirements from your payload on what effect you might have on other things. Anything that you need to take into consideration with regards to, you should not be near other equipment that is sensitive to, radiation in this energy range, that kind of information. You need to include that. I would recommend that you include shielding and the appropriate packaging to protect from other payloads, right? Because there will be other things on these CLIPS landers that you need to be conscious of. So anything that keeps your instrument from interfering with other people's payloads is a good thing.
Great. Okay. So how often can the max power limit per second be okay? Is 8 watts, 0.75 amps with 50% duty cycle okay?
Yeah, we'll have to take that to our electrical team to make sure they're okay with that. Yeah, I have a guess, but I don't want to speculate at this point. I'd like them to answer.
Okay. To build the prototypes, can we use a company or partner not included in the team roster and not a resident in the US, like a Chinese factory, to build electronic boards? So yes, you can use a company or a partner, but they do still need to abide by all of the same restrictions on where they're located and those sorts of details to be compliant with a legal agreement. Jeff, anything you'd like to add?
That was a perfect response. Thank you.
Okay. Is it okay to submit a manuscript about the concept design of the proposal to a space science journal prior to January 5th, 2021?
Yes, I don't see any problem with that.
Are there restrictions about additive manufacturing for the payloads?
That's an involved question. A lot of it includes how they're cleaned and they're finished afterwards, because they don't want small particles coming off of the additive parts. But certainly additive manufacturing is acceptable method. We just want to be careful. And I think probably if you go that route, then we would probably have you work with our manufacturing team to make sure that you've done it in a way that won't cause problems.
Okay, great. Okay, if there are amendments in the proposal, should we resubmit the whole proposal or just the amendments? I'm assuming this question is talking about things that have changed since their initial submission to the prior challenge and whether we'd like the proposal resubmitted. I think the answer is no. Andrew or Valerie or Eloise, anything you'd like to offer to this question?
I wouldn't expect you to resubmit the earlier proposal. Your proposal that you're submitting now should be a standalone document. So if there are modifications, if they're significant, then perhaps we need to talk about this. But if they're minor design changes, I don't think that that's a big deal, and that should just, you should just talk about it in your proposal as though that is your design.
And I think that the intent here is that what was submitted previously was submitted as a really substantial thought exercise. What should be submitted in this go round is something much more concrete that can be definitively reduced to a prototype within the time limits of the phase 2 development period.
Okay, so what happens if one of the winning teams does not complete the development of their payload due to any number of reasons? Could a runner-up fly if done?
Well, we expect multiple payloads to fly. I think it just depends on when that happens. If it happens relatively early in the development cycle, it's possible that one of the runner-up teams could be pulled forward. If we're getting well into the program, I don't think that it's would be to the point where once we've started things like the environmental testing, then it will be much more difficult.
Okay. All right, I just want to come back for a moment to the question about being able to use a company or a private partner as part of your team. And so the question was, in the Chinese factory example, China's not a designated country, so they cannot be used. So I just want to clarify that you can have participation from a designated country, but whatever is contributed needs to be substantially transformed in a designated country. So you will need to pay attention to anyone that you're working with who is not from one of those designated countries. Okay, another question about prize money. So let's consider that a team builds the prototypes, pays for all the labor, and is not selected in the end. So the first clarification I'll make is that only those up to 4 teams who progress into phase 2 will be doing any development that's funded by NASA. So if you are not selected in one of those 4 teams, you won't be moving forward as part of this project after you submit your development plan. There are 2 monetary prizes at the end of phase 2 for the best prototypes, and there's phase 2 evaluation criteria. And yes, there are only 2 prizes at that stage, but our hope is potentially there could be more than 2 payloads that fly to the moon if that's appropriate for the mission and if they pass environmental testing. Andrew, Valerie, anything to add?
No, you covered it. Thank you, Carla.
Okay. What is the dollar amount of each award of the current solicitation? So the current dollar amounts are all within the guidelines. Everything that has been released currently is here. So you can see the details on the different prizes under this prize section. And I am in the challenge guidelines tab of the HeroX page. Okay, there's a question here about substantially transformed. I think for now, we're not going to answer that question on this call, but we will see.
This would be
Go
a
ahead.
great question for to ask our ITAR person on the 15th.
Great. Okay, what is the schedule of the effort, i.e. proposal due date, date of selection announcements, date of funding, and start work, date to complete the work. So all of that information is in the challenge guidelines here. There's a timeline section that spells out what all of those stages are. So currently we're here on October 5th. By October 8th, we're asking that you complete the form about whether you would choose to participate. And by October 15th, this will officially launch. And the following milestones are also included on this timeline. Okay, how are the prototype developments funded? I think we've talked about this at length, so I'm assuming we've probably already answered this question. If there's something else there that you're looking for, please add it with a little bit more specificity. Okay, vibration, shock, and thermal endurance tests must be done and passed for the prototypes, or will this be done in a 3rd phase?
So kind of as we mentioned before, the vibration, shock, and thermal will be done after the phase 2 prototypes are delivered. However, we expect you to have done some dynamic modeling to give us confidence that they will survive.
Okay, is integration with the rovers required for the prototypes, such as electrical, communications, and mechanical?
We will be doing the integration when we do the testing, so they will probably be tested in their integrated form.
Okay, so I just want to let everyone know that we are now at the top of the hour. So we will stay on and see if we can get through a few more of these questions. Thank you, Andrew and Valerie, for going through so many responses with us. If you do need to jump off because we only had an hour booked, like I said, this is being recorded and we will share the recording with you so you can review any responses that you may have missed. Okay, another question about funding. So I think, again, we have covered this. That should be part of the budget that you're proposing in your development plan and will be part of the development funding that is provided by NASA. And you can look to external sources for any additional funding. Can you elaborate more on the project plan? What would make a successful project plan?
Valerie, do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, I think we kind of hit on this a little bit earlier, but I mean, every payload is going to have a very individualized project plan. You want to make it clear what things need to happen on your end to convince us that you will be able to deliver this in the short development time. A year is pretty quick. So you want to have very clear and concise objectives and milestones and deliverables and a timeline along which you expect to meet those. And then within your, and that's more on your timeline piece. And then within your plan, you want to convince us that the tasks that you need to do to meet those milestones is achievable within the funding that you're asking for and the timeline that you're given. So it's going to be very dependent on where your payload is starting and how complex your payload is. So I hope that addresses the question sufficiently for whoever wrote that one.
Yeah, and I think we have outlined in the documents kind of what things are expected. I think there's a fair amount of detail in what the content ought to be.
Okay, who will be responsible for writing Roverside driver software?
The NASA teams will do their rover operations as they always do. The expectation is that if you have specific requirements for your instrument in order to make a measurement, then in the operations section, which is a new section that's been added since the previous version of the user's guide, in the operations section, you need to really tell us exactly what the operational requirements are, but the NASA teams will be executing that.
Great, thank you. Okay. Is clean room integration required for the submitted payloads at the end of phase 2?
We expect to integrate them in a clean room. That's just our standard practice. So I'm not sure what they're asking in this question precisely, but yes, we expect to integrate them in a clean room.
I think the catch is that will be done on our end. That
Yes.
They will not be held responsible for supplying a clean room.
Yes, that is
I
correct.
think that's what they're getting at.
Yeah, we will supply the clean room.
Okay, are only the groups allowed to compete that are the initial winners, or are outside groups allowed to enter? So we are strongly encouraging everyone to recruit additional teams or additional team members, sorry. So take a look at the expertise that you need and figure out how you need to augment and supplement your current team. We will also be providing support for teams that need to recruit additional members. So when you complete your registration form on the 8th, there are a few questions that are specific to what expertise you're looking for. And if you would like to list that publicly on the challenge page, and we will create that kind of profile for you. As of right now, we are expecting that only the 14 groups will be participating in this upcoming phase. Is our current intention. Jeff, anyone else would like to add to that answer?
I think that was an appropriate response.
Great.
And I also think that for the teams that do complete the registration and list where they perceive that they may have gaps, that it is the intention that the website will support these teams in helping them to recruit new team members by having specific areas for them to highlight the types of expertise that they are seeking.
Great. Is the technical drawing from the first competition still valid in this competition?
The answer is probably, as long as it meets the updated drawing and user guide requirements. So you'll look at the updated specification. There may be some pin changes in the connector, so you need to double check that. But other than that, it should be fine. It just, if you're comfortable with that drawing as the completed version of your payload, then that should be okay. But please do double check the interface connection requirements. It may just require moving a wire to a different pin on the connector.
Okay, how will our final prototypes be tested?
I would expect 2 phases of testing. One of them is just an on the laboratory bench in terms of turning it on and making sure that the prototypes are working. And then we will test it in an integrated form on either the arm or the rover, the appropriate rover, or some substitute for that. And then it'll go from there into the full environmental testing.
Okay, I'm going to jump down to this. Can you expand on environmental testing? Anything additional that you'd like to add at this time?
We'll give full details of what we plan to do, but there's kind of a NASA standard for testing. Usually it's vibration with a dynamic spectrum in 3 dimensions. It's usually a shock testing. There's usually a thermal vacuum. Usually there's a thermal cycle or deep thermal cycle. Sometimes there's a high temperature storage, but it's hard to give it precisely at this point because those specifications have not been written precisely for the platforms, but it'll be follow the very similar to standard NASA testing.
Okay, great. Are there shock, vibration, or other thresholds available that NASA wants us to reach at this time?
So this is similar to the previous questions in that we'll provide a general vibration, shock, and thermal, but the detailed one won't be available until we know which launch vehicle we're going on.
Okay, when calculating our project plans, should we account for the monetary value of labor and/or electronic programs?
You should certainly account for your labor. And I'm not sure what they mean by electronic programs, but does that mean purchasing software? If you can do it on borrowed software, that's fine. If you need to purchase special software that you don't have or your institution doesn't have, then that needs to be in the cost.
Okay, what is your confidence of the winning submission flying? And I know that's a difficult question, but Andrew, anything you can offer?
I don't know. Kevin's probably more qualified as he's not here. I can't give you an official one. I can give you a intuitive feel. I think these have a very high probability of flying. They are currently manifested on the plans for the next 5 years of launches. And so if they're on a manifest, they have a high probability of flying. Let me put it that way. But it is possible Rover could be cut, things like that. Those are certainly always possible when dealing with space missions.
Okay, will there be any fabrication resources at JPL that will be usable by us?
Probably not.
Okay. Another question about maximum funds and expectations. So I would encourage you to go back and just read through these challenge guidelines in full, spend some time going through them. And if you have specific questions where the expectations outlined here are not clear, please come back to us and we'll be happy to fill in any details. But these guidelines and this tab should really be your guide for what we're looking for. Okay, a clarification about the clean room. So clean room integration is required required on our end of the construction so no clean room integration is required by the teams at the end of their construction and building the payload.
That's correct. However, we would encourage you to use the clean room if you have access to one, or certainly try to keep it in as clean an environment as possible.
Okay, we are down to the final 2 questions. Well done. Will new team members be permitted to join any team after phase 1? So I can start at that question. So yes, you can add new expertise to your team if required at the start of phase 1. And again, they'll need to comply with all the same restrictions that are on your current team. Will a description of the radiation environment be provided?
So we have to be careful about answering this question, but a generic sense of the requirements for survival on the moon in terms of KRADs per year, yes, we will provide one.
Great. Okay, we have made it to the end of our Q&A. Thank you so much to everyone that's hung on with us for a full hour and 15 minutes. We really appreciate your time and taking this time to review these questions with us. I'd just like to reiterate our timeline. So we are asking that you complete that registration form by October 8th, which is coming up very quickly. So please take a look at it, continue to read what's on the challenge guidelines. If you have additional questions, please post them in the forum and we'll do our best to get back to you as soon as we can. We will also share this recording with you and it will go out via the challenge so you can watch for it there. Okay, and with that, thank you everyone. We are super excited to launch this. It will be something that's public and you can talk about on October 15th. So just hang tight for now and keep it within your teams and those interested in participating in your teams. And we're looking forward to working with you on this next project. All right, have a great rest of your day. Thanks everyone.
Thank you all.